where we've moved across to a stubble field now, and this will be pretty typical of quite large tracts of land across the UK from last autumn, where rain started so early in such high amounts that farmers were completely unable to do any cultivation whatsoever. So they're faced with a situation now of either, as we are in this field, with actually the straw baled off post-harvest, but no cultivation applied at all, or we may have straw chopped on the surface of the stubble. So what to do with those? Well, the first thing I would say is, actually you're probably in one of the best situations. You may not appreciate that, but you are in one of the best situations in terms of soil condition and stability right now, because you've applied no cultivation to the upper part of the soil. And this stubble field has no ponding of water on it at all, whereas neighbouring fields which have just had even a light cultivation, but in some cases 2 cultivations prior to being drilled with wheat, have ponding on the surface. Drainage is fine, but we've got ponding on the surface because of capping following the cultivations and the extreme wet weather we've experienced. So I wanted to have a quick look at these stubbles, really to encourage you to get out there with a spade, dig a hole and understand exactly what you're dealing with, because the first thing to say, the surface of the soils is really friable. If we can just have the patience to let this dry, there's on a lot of soils, even some quite stiff clays, because what's on the surface right now is effectively 18 months almost of weathering on the surface. We do have this really nice friable seabed on the top. We just got to let it dry before we can drill into it. The condition of the soil all the way down through the profile is really nice and open. Now this soil has been managed for the previous 3 years using shallow tillage techniques, so we built good soil structure throughout the profile, but it's not overly wet down there. We've got nice even passage of moisture down through the entire profile. There's no water sitting up in the top here like there was in the rape field we looked at, which had only a light cultivation applied, but we'd still got water held up in the top a little bit due to that cultivation. But in here the water's passaging through the surface, down through the profile, and the soil's nice and friable and open as it goes down through. We can also see worm activity up in the top half, nice honeycomb structure developed. So my question here would be, if you are in a stubble situation, why not think about doing as little as possible, almost going straight in with the drill. Just let it dry on top, straight in with the drill. This is not a year to be trying to rectify issues with soil. No doubt we are going to move into a very prolonged dry period in the spring when the weather finally settles down. So if we start to move these soils, they're just going to dry rapidly and we'll get poor spring crops. So get out with a spade, have a good look at the structure you've got under your stubbles, have a look at the seedbed that you would be drilling into. Ignore the stubble itself. What's the surface of that soil like? Can I drill direct into there? And I would suggest most of the time that would be the best route to take this coming spring. Now the other issue that will always crop up, of course, and we mentioned it in the rape video, is harvest wheeling. So obviously we've harvested the field, we've baled the straw off here, so we've got wheelings running up and down this field. I've dug some more soil out just over here within that harvest wheeling, and that's just here. Yes, it's a little bit tighter in the top than where there's no wheeling applied to it, but again, no water being hung up on the top, water passing down through the profile perfectly well. So worms working through that soil, it's breaking up really quite nicely. Yes, this is an organic based soil, so it's got lots of organic matter in it, which makes it work really well, but it's also got a fair degree of clay as part of its texture in this soil, so it's by no means light, easy stuff. It will go quite hard and sticky if we overwork it with the clay content within this soil. Work with what we've got, which is nice, friable, soil. Again, as we move down into this profile, it's not overly wet. So work from the top down, utilize this really nice seed bed that we have already on the top. So spend some time looking at your stubbles and understand exactly what it is that you need to apply to them to get a good crop. There will be a compromise requirement in spring 2020 because of the amount of rainfall we've had. We are not going to have perfect scenarios. So do as much as you need to do, but don't do too much.
One of the main problems I'm seeing on farms that have used a whole range of different techniques for cultivating is where people have made that additional cultivation or squared off headlands. There definitely seems to be a lot more ponding, and it's something that as farmers we need to be really careful that we don't just do that extra cultivation for aesthetics. We really need to make sure we're looking at the soil profile, digging to make sure we know exactly what's happening. Because as I've been driving around and looking at fields, it's certainly very obvious where farmers have just nipped over that extra pass with the cultivator to try and freshen things up, and unfortunately the fields are just getting wetter and wetter in this season, and it's definitely going to impact the soils long term.